My parents always said there were no favorites. Same rules, same love, same support. I believed that for a long time. Until money was involved growing up, that sentence was repeated so often in our house that it felt like a rule carved into the walls, something unquestionable and permanent. They said they loved all three of us equally. They said they treated us the same. They said fairness was the foundation of our family. And for many years, I believed them, because when you are a child, you don't yet have the language to recognize bias when it hides behind tradition, or control when it disguises itself as care. There were three of us siblings. I am Jessica, the eldest. Then came my younger brother, Ronnie. And the youngest was my sister, Rachel. We grew up in Houston, in what most people would call a normal, stable, middle-class home. There was never hunger, never chaos, never loud instability. Bills were paid on time, food was always on the table, and emergencies were rare. On the surface, it looked like a peaceful, grounded household. But inside, ambition was not celebrated. It was quietly discouraged. Wanting more was seen as unnecessary, and dreaming too loudly was treated almost like a character flaw. My father owned a car garage, a business that had been passed down for generations. His father had owned it. His grandfather before him had started it. It was the kind of business that didn't make headlines, didn't expand, and didn't innovate. It simply survived. It earned just enough to keep the lights on and the family comfortable, but never enough to build significant savings or open new doors. My father believed deeply in maintaining what already existed, not in growing it. To him, stability was success, risk was foolish, change was dangerous. My mother was a housewife her entire life. She managed the home, raised us, cooked our meals, and upheld the values she herself had inherited. She believed strongly that a woman's role was inside the house, while a man's role was outside, earning money and carrying responsibility. In our family, this belief was not debated. It was accepted as truth. Ambition, especially for women, was not encouraged. Financial freedom was not discussed. Careers were not something to aspire to. According to my parents and relatives, real life was simple. You get married, you raise children, you eat together, you live peacefully in a small circle. Anything beyond that was considered unnecessary, unrealistic, or even selfish. Vacations were rare because they were considered a waste of money. Saving for the future was never prioritized because my parents believed that tomorrow would take care of itself, just as yesterday always had. Goals were not something you planned for, life was something you accepted. And while that philosophy might work for some people, for me, it slowly began to feel like a cage. As the eldest child, expectations were heavier on my shoulders. When I graduated high school, I felt proud. I wanted to go to college, I wanted to study. I didn't even have a grand dream at that point. I just wanted independence. I wanted to become someone who could stand on her own feet. But when I shared that desire, the reaction from my entire family was immediate and discouraging. They told me college was a waste of time. They said I would lose my prime years chasing something I would never become. They told me, very plainly, that I wasn't smart enough to succeed anyway. They said my actual purpose in life was to get married, have children, and raise them well. According to them, that was fulfillment. That was a success. Anything else was an illusion created by modern society. I didn't have the money to pay for college myself. My parents refused to support the idea financially. There were no scholarships offered, no encouragement given, no alternative paths discussed. So I did what I could. I started working as an assistant at a small boutique. The job was simple. I helped customers, organized clothes, cleaned displays. The pay was low, but I told myself it was temporary. I thought maybe I could save enough to eventually afford college on my own, but reality caught up quickly. The salary barely covered transportation and basic expenses. There was no room to save, no path forward. And slowly, painfully, I realized that my dream was slipping away. I gave up the idea of college, and not long after that, my parents arranged my marriage. At that time, I told myself this was life. Maybe they were right. That maybe ambition was overrated. I got married to a man they considered suitable. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't abusive, but he wasn't someone who encouraged growth either. He believed in traditional roles just as strongly as my parents did. He expected me to depend on him, and for a while, I did, but something inside me never settled. The feeling of wanting independence never disappeared. I hated asking my husband for money for basic needs. I hated feeling like I needed permission to exist comfortably. Over time, that discomfort turned into frustration, and eventually, it became determination. I started looking for work again. With no degree and little experience, my options were limited. I found a junior sales position at a fashion store. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't prestigious, but it was work. And more importantly, it was mine. I was earning something instead of nothing. I could buy my own things, I could contribute, I could breathe. My parents did not take this decision well. They stopped talking to me entirely. They accused me of disrespecting my husband. They said if I was working, it meant he couldn't provide for me, and that would bring shame to the family. They told me I was choosing money over values. But this time, I didn't listen. Because for the first time in my life, I felt like myself. While I was rebuilding my life, my brother's path looked very different. Ronnie had always been treated gently. When he expressed ambition, it was praised. When he wanted to study, it was supported. He got accepted into one of his dream colleges, and my parents paid his tuition without hesitation. There were no lectures about wasting time, no warnings about unrealistic dreams. Suddenly, money wasn't a problem. Support wasn't conditional. Around the same time, my sister Rachel graduated from high school. When she asked about college, she received the same answer I once had. They told her there was no money for her. They gave her the same advice they had given me: get married, stay home, don't chase unrealistic goals. But Rachel was different. She refused. She left the house. She moved into a shared apartment. She started a small home kitchen and bakery business using whatever little savings she had. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for approval. She just started. And when she needed help, she reached out to me. She sent samples of her food to my workplace. I shared them with my colleagues. They loved it. Soon, they started placing regular orders for customized lunches. Slowly, her business began to grow. And at the same time, I started growing too. I worked hard at my job. I learned sales. I learned customer psychology. I stayed late. I took responsibility. And eventually, I was promoted to a senior position. 3 years passed like this. 3 years of silence from my parents. 3 years of growth for me and my sister. Rachel expanded her business and enrolled in college part-time. I became financially comfortable and confident. We weren't rich, but we were independent. We had built something with our own hands. Then one day, my phone rang. It was my mother. She had seen my picture on the brand's social media page, announcing my promotion. She had also heard about Rachel's business and her upcoming graduation. Her voice sounded different, softer, concerned, because while we had been building our lives, everything else had started to fall apart. When my mother called after all those years of silence, her voice carried a weight I had never heard before. It was no longer authoritative or judgmental. It was careful, almost hesitant, as if she was choosing each word slowly, afraid that one wrong sentence might end the conversation. She asked how I was doing. She asked about my job. She mentioned, very casually, that she had seen my photo online. She said she was proud. But the way she said it felt unfamiliar, as if pride was a language she was still learning how to speak. I listened quietly. I didn't interrupt. I didn't challenge her sudden interest. Because instinctively, I knew this call wasn't just about reconnecting. It wasn't just about missed years or emotional healing. Something had gone wrong. And soon enough, she told me, my brother Ronnie had failed out of college, not quietly, not gradually, completely. He had started skipping classes early on, something my parents didn't notice because they trusted him. He told them he was doing well. He showed them fake schedules, fake results, fake confidence. Meanwhile, he had started spending time with people who introduced him to drugs. It began with casual marijuana use, something he told himself was harmless. But it didn't stop there. His attendance dropped, his grades collapsed. He failed multiple subjects in one semester, then another. By the third semester, the college expelled him. Instead of coming home, Ronnie stayed with friends. He lied to my parents for months, continuing to ask for money under the excuse of fees and books. And my parents, believing they were investing in their son's future, kept giving it to him. By the time the truth came out, the damage was already done. When my parents finally discovered what had happened, they panicked. The son they had placed all their hopes in was spiraling. They rushed him into treatment. They paid for counseling, rehabilitation, medications, and private consultations. They used every bit of their savings. Everything they had put aside for emergencies disappeared within months. At the same time, my father's garage business started declining rapidly. New competitors entered the market. Technology changed. Customer expectations evolved. But my father refused to adapt. He refused to modernize. He refused to expand or restructure. The business that had sustained generations began to crumble. And suddenly, the stability my parents had always trusted vanished. That was when they remembered us. That was when the daughters they had discouraged, dismissed, and silenced became relevant again. My mother asked if we could meet. She said the family needed to talk. She said things had been difficult. I agreed, but not because I felt obligated. I agreed because I wanted to see them clearly for the first time, without the fear and obedience that had shaped my younger years. When I walked into my parents' house, it felt smaller than I remembered. The walls hadn't changed, but the energy had. My father looked older, tired. The confidence he once carried had thinned. My mother looked anxious, constantly adjusting her scarf, avoiding direct eye contact. And Ronnie wasn't there. They started by apologizing. Not directly, not fully, but enough to acknowledge that mistakes had been made. They said they had been worried. They said they hadn't known what else to do. Then, slowly, the conversation shifted. They asked how much I earned now. They asked if I had savings. They asked about Rachel's business. They asked questions they had never cared to ask before. And suddenly, the pattern became impossible to ignore. For years, they had claimed there were no favorites. But when resources were limited, support had gone in one direction. When dreams were expensive, daughters were told to adjust. When ambition required money, sons were prioritized. And now that money was gone, fairness was being redefined again. Rachel joined us later that day. She listened quietly as our parents explained their situation. They talked about Ronnie's condition. They talked about debt. They talked about the failing business. And finally, they asked for help. They didn't ask emotionally, they asked practically. They wanted financial support. They wanted assistance with bills. They wanted help covering treatment costs. They wanted us to step in where they could no longer manage. I felt something shift inside me at that moment. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. I asked them a simple question. I asked why, when Ronnie wanted to study, money had magically appeared, but when Rachel and I had asked, it had not. I asked why ambition was considered dangerous for daughters but essential for a son. I asked why independence was disrespectful when we pursued it, but expected when he failed. They struggled to answer. They spoke about culture, about tradition, about what they thought was right at the time, but none of it explained the imbalance, none of it erased the years of dismissal. Rachel spoke then, calmly, clearly. She said she loved them, but she would not sacrifice the life she had built to fix the consequences of decisions she had been excluded from. She said helping was one thing, but being expected to clean up a mess created by favoritism was another. I agreed with her. I told my parents that we were willing to help within boundaries. We would not fund irresponsibility, we would not be treated as backup plans, and we would not accept guilt as payment for our success. That conversation changed everything. For the first time, my parents were forced to confront the reality they had avoided. That stability without growth is fragile. That tradition without reflection becomes biased. That control does not equal care. We helped them restructure the garage business. We didn't give money blindly. We connected them with consultants. We helped modernize operations. We insisted on accountability. Ronnie continued treatment, but financial support was conditional on effort and transparency. It wasn't easy. There were arguments. There were tears. There were moments when old habits resurfaced. But something fundamental had shifted. My parents stopped saying there were no favorites. Instead, they started saying they had been wrong. And I realized something important. Equality isn't declared, it's demonstrated. Fairness isn't claimed, it's practiced. And love, real love, doesn't fear ambition. It doesn't silence growth. And it doesn't disappear until money is on the table. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who's ever been told to adjust while others were supported. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories about family, money, ambition, and the truths we're often afraid to talk about. And comment below if you believe parents really have no favorites, or if money simply reveals what was already there.